Welcome to No Nonsense Psychiatry, the podcast that cuts through the noise and the confusion surrounding mental health. My name is Mark and I'm your host, and my goal is to give you the clear, practical information you need to understand your own well-being. No jargon, no fluff, just honest, helpful tools to help you on your journey. Let's dive in.
No nonsense.
Welcome back to No Nonsense Psychiatry, the podcast built to empower you, both sufferers and carers, with a clear and what I like to think of as practical knowledge. I'm your host, Mark, and today we're talking about things starting with just a feeling, a slight uneasiness and the sense that someone is watching, or the certainty that an innocent laugh in the distance was actually directed at you. This isn't just distrust, it's a signature of paranoia. Intense, irrational suspicion that others are intentionally trying to harm, deceive, or exploit you in some way, despite any lack of evidence. In this episode 83, Paranoia, we're clarifying this is often a misunderstood term. We'll outline the key characteristics of paranoid thought, from hyper-vigilance to the rigidity of belief, and examine where it fits into the clinical conditions like paranoid personality disorder and schizophrenia. Crucially, we'll be spending time drawing the bright line between clinical paranoia and normal paranoia, that healthy protective caution that keeps your bank account safe and your car locked. We'll show you exactly how to distinguish between a warranted suspicion and a disruptive delusion by assessing its evidence, scope, and function. Finally, because understanding is useless without action, we'll provide you with 3 essential gentle strategies you can use immediately to interrupt this thought cycle and provide reassurance. Whether you're yourself using the stop technique, or for a loved one using validation and not confrontation. If you or someone else you care about lives with persistent suspicion, this episode is your guide to grounded and understanding. So let's begin. Paranoia is a term used in psychiatry and psychology to describe intense, irrational feelings of suspicion and distrust, and these can be severe enough to interfere with your daily life. The core characteristics is the persistent belief that other people are trying to harm, deceive, or exploit you, despite a lack of evidence. Key characteristics of paranoia are: paranoid thoughts are generally characterized by the following: suspicion and distrust, a pervasive feeling that others cannot be trusted, even friends and family. Or the perceived threat, the belief that one is the target of malicious intent, ranging from verbal abuse or gossip to elaborate plots of conspiracy or even physical harm. Hypervigilance, constantly scanning the environment for evidence that confirms the suspicious beliefs. And attribution of meaning, so interpreting neutral and ambiguous actions, gestures or events as intentionally hostile or threatening. For example, a laugh in the distance is taken as a personal insult. And then of course there's that rigidity of belief. A paranoid belief is generally held with absolute certainty, and it's not easily changed by contradictory evidence or logical argument. Paranoia in mental health is not just a single diagnosis, but often a symptom or key features of several mental health conditions. There's paranoid personality disorder, a pervasive lifelong pattern of distrust and suspicion of others and their motives. Or delusional disorder, persecutory type, and this is the presence of one or more non-bizarre fixed delusions of being persecuted or conspired against, lasting for at least 1 month. And then there's schizophrenia, the paranoid type historically, and that's delusions of persecution accompanied by other psychotic symptoms like hallucinations or disorganized thinking. So the distinction from the normal caution, it's important to distinguish the clinical pattern from normal realistic caution, or just concerns based on prior experience. Caution is being careful when handed sensitive information or locking your doors, and this is proportionate to a real risk, isn't it? And then there's paranoia, believing that your neighbours are breaking into your house to poison you or your toothbrush. Despite no signs of forced entry, there is that disproportionate and often fixed thought about things. So let's talk about normal paranoia. Okay, it's not normally a formal diagnosis, but it's often used informally to describe a healthy, rational caution or common tendency towards suspicion that is proportionate to real-world risks. And it represents a necessary psychological defense mechanism that helps us navigate the complexities of potential dangers in our social world. So the characteristics of normal paranoia, that healthy caution. So healthy suspicion is flexible, is temporary and grounded in evidence or experience, and it differs sharply from clinical paranoia, which is often rigid and baseless. So a feature, for instance, a basis for normal paranoia is evidence-based, it's grounded in past experience, specific context, or genuine risk assessment. And the specific situation is focused on a particular person, event or context, i.e. not trusting a specific email. The duration is normally temporary and it dissipates when the perceived risk is resolved or the environment changes. And the function is protective and it motivates self-preservation, safety and vigilance, i.e. locking your doors. On a clinical paranoid disorder, the basis might be irrational or delusion and it's fixed on false beliefs despite contradictory evidence. The scope is usually distrust directed towards almost everybody, e.g. The entire neighbourhood is plotting against me. The duration is normally chronic, so that's been going on for a long time and it's persistent, so it's a long-term state of mind. And the function is dysfunctional and it causes distress, social isolation and interferes with your daily functioning. So examples of normal paranoia, and this is simply an evolved trait designed to ensure survival and social success. Okay, so you got this risk aversion, checking your bank statement regularly for unauthorised charges, or double checking if your car is locked. You have social defences and feeling suspicious when a stranger offers you a deal that seems just too good to be true. Or it might be trust calibration, and that it's being initially cautious and reserved when meeting new people and slowly letting down your guard only after establishing some sort of trustworthiness. Cyber security, assuming a link in your email from an unknown sender is malicious, or it might be phishing paranoia and not clicking it. And in essence, normal paranoia is a smart survival psychology. It means that you are appropriately vigilant about real threats without allowing suspicion to dominate your life or your social relationships. And to distinguish between real paranoia, that healthy caution, and real paranoia, that clinical paranoia, it relies on assessing three main factors: the evidence, the scope, and the function. So here are four clear ways to distinguish between them. Evidence and reality testing. The most crucial difference lies in the connection to reality and the ability to test those beliefs. So let's look at some real healthy paranoia caution. So the basis is it's grounded in evidence and fact, and the suspicion is based on past experience, observed data or known risks, i.e. this website looks exactly like a phishing site I saw last month. And the flexibility is adjustable, so if new evidence proves that the suspicion is wrong, i.e. the bank confirms that the transfer was legitimate, the concerns dissipate immediately. And then there is the reality testing. The individual can pause and ask, is this likely? And then the feature of real paranoia is, what is the real risk here? And usually we arrive at some sort of reasonable conclusion. With not real paranoia, clinical paranoia, the basis of suspicion that lacks that external evidence or logic, and the belief is internally driven and often fixed, meaning contradictory evidence doesn't change that suspicion whatsoever. The flexibility is usually rigid and fixed, delusional. And this person often finds ways to rationalise the evidence away, i.e. the bank is part of the conspiracy. When reality testing, the individual cannot easily distinguish between their internal fears and external reality, and this leads into this persistent doubt of certainty or threat. And there is no real paranoia. It's not real paranoia, basically. That's the feature of it. It's just not real. So scope and specificity, a clinical paranoia is pervasive. It's colouring all interactions while healthy caution is targeted. And real paranoia is specific, and this suspicion is directed at a specific person, an object or a situation based on the context. For example, being cautious about the terms of a new contract from a company known for its tricky fine print. And as opposed to the pervasive, not real paranoia, the suspicion is generalised and broad, and it's directed at many people or groups simultaneously without any specific provocation. So, example, believing that strangers on the bus are communicating in code about you, or feeling that all colleagues are actively trying to sabotage your career. So the function and consequence of a healthy caution is adaptive and protective. Clinical paranoia is disruptive and isolating. So real paranoia is protective, and the caution serves as function, protective purpose. It motivates you to secure your assets, maintain safety, or avoid genuine harm. And it improves survival. Locking your car in a new city you've just visited, or keeping private information off of social media, as opposed to the not real paranoia that is dysfunctional, and the suspicion causes this significant impairment that leads to social isolation, and you avoid people due to fear, you have difficulty working and intense stress all the time, and it actively harms your quality of life, and I'm sure you can start to see that. So proportionally to the threat, assess whether the emotional reaction and behaviour response fits the actual level of danger. So with the emotional response, a momentary feeling, this is in real paranoia of course, a momentary feeling of uneasiness or alertness that matches the level of risk. And the behaviour response is it's a reasonable safe measure, i.e. changing a password. With not real paranoia, the emotional response is extreme anxiety, fear and anger in response to minor or ambiguous stimuli, i.e. yelling at the cashier for smiling suspiciously. And the behaviour response is usually excessive and unnecessary action that significantly impacts life, i.e. refusing to leave the house, installing complex surveillance equipment for no reason. If the suspicion is unwarranted, rigid, pervasive, and severely changing your daily life, it's likely that clinical paranoia may be warranted some sort of professional evaluation. And there are several reasons why a person might suddenly start feeling paranoid. And these causes can range from a temporary environmental stressor or physical state to the onset of mental health conditions or the effects of substances. There might be psychological and stress-related causes, and these reasons are often temporary and triggered by specific circumstances. Extreme stress or trauma, the sudden overwhelming stress of a traumatic event, or a chronic lack of sleep that can severely deplete your cognitive resources. And this stress can lead to a hyper-vigilance, constantly feeling on edge, and misinterpretation of neutral stimuli as threats, which mimics paranoia. There could be severe anxiety, and if the anxiety suddenly spikes, it can manifest as the fear of being judged, observed, or targeted, and it starts to blur that line into paranoid thoughts. And then, of course, you've got isolation and loneliness. So extreme social isolation can lead to increased suspicious thinking. And when social connection is absent, the brain kind of loses corrective feedback, and individuals might start to begin to fill in the blanks about others' thoughts and intentions with negative assumptions. And then sleep deprivation, so prolonged or severe lack of sleep can trigger temporary psychotic symptoms, including paranoia, as cognitive function starts to break down. Or there might be a medical or mental health onset. A sudden onset of paranoia can be the initial sign of developing clinical condition that needs professional attention. So the onset of a psychotic disorder is the sudden escalation of paranoia. If fixed and bizarre, can be one of the first clear signs of a conditions like schizophrenia or a delusional disorder. Mood episodes, severe bipolar or depression. So in severe episodes of bipolar disorder, mania, paranoia may emerge alongside grandiosity and the extreme irritability. Or severe depression can also be a feature of paranoid delusions, i.e. believing the police are coming to arrest them for a minor mistake that they might have made, or no mistake, a perceived mistake. And then there's dementia or neurocognitive disorders. For adults, a sudden shift in behaviour and the emergence of paranoid thoughts, i.e. accusing caregivers of stealing, can be early signs of decline in cognitive function. There could be medical conditions such as various physical health conditions including brain tumours, strokes, infections like sepsis, or the autoimmune conditions that can affect the nervous system. Of course, there's substance-related causes, and chemical changes in the brain, especially those induced by substances, are common causes of acute and sudden paranoia. Substance intoxication, the use of certain psychoactive drugs that cause acute intense paranoia, which often dissipates as the drug leaves the system. Common culprits of this is stimulants like cocaine, methamphetamine, or high doses of amphetamines. Cannabis, or THCs, it's got a high potency cannabis, can induce temporary paranoid thoughts, especially in new or sensitive users. And of course, hallucinogens. The withdrawal is suddenly stopping certain medications and substances like alcohol or benzodiazepines can lead to severe anxiety, agitation and paranoid thoughts as the brain overcompensates. Or if someone's experienced a sudden intense onset of paranoia that is impairing their life, causing distress or leading to potential harm and harmful behaviour, they should seek immediate professional medical or psychiatric help. Reassuring someone who is experiencing paranoia or implementing self-reassurance strategies requires gentle logic and focus on grounding. So here are 3 distinct strategies you can use framed for both self-reassurance and helping others. And these strategies can be used while you wait for the mental health services or the ambulance to arrive. The first is the STOP, S-T-O-P-P technique. For self-reassurance, and this is a cognitive behavioural strategy used to interrupt the cycle of rising anxiety and suspicious thought by focusing on a pause or a reality check. The first step is stop, and that is to physically freeze or say stop mentally aloud. The goal is to interrupt automatic thought spiral. Take a breath is the next letter, T. Focus entirely on one deep, slow breath in and out, and this activates the parasympathetic nervous system to calm the physical anxiety response. The next letter, O, observe. Ask, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What is actually happening around me? And the goal is to shift focus from the internal abstract fear to the external concrete reality. P is the next letter, and this is the critical reassurance step, and use logic. Ask, is this thought 100% fact or is it fear? What is the evidence versus the fear? So you're introducing doubt into the paranoid thought and create a distance from it. And the final letter is practice what works, P. Engage in a simple grounding activity, i.e. the 5-second chill, stretching or walking. And you commit to this small action to exit the loop and restore control. The next step uses validation, not confrontation, for reassuring others. So when someone else is paranoid, arguing against their belief will only make them feel more isolated and certain of some sort of threat. And the goal is to validate that feeling without endorsing their belief. So the strategy is to acknowledge the distress and deflect the belief, the bad approach and confrontation, like that's ridiculous, or the postman isn't spying on you. This just invalidates their experience. A good approach is to validate and deflection. I know that you feel absolutely convinced that this feared event is happening, and that sounds incredibly scary and stressful. I'm not seeing the evidence for that right now, but I'm here with you. let's try, and then a distraction technique. The reassurance is to focus on their immediate safety and your reliable presence. Instead of saying you are safe, try I am safe and you are safe with me. This centers the reassurance on the present moment and your shared reality, and the action is to gently shift their focus to the immediate environment with a simple task like making a cup of tea or a short walk as a form of distraction. And then there is the reality check protocol, the evidence-based reassurance. And this strategy is about collaborative, objective fact-checking to avoid to provide evidence-based reassurance. And this works best when the paranoia is situational or moderate and not when it's fixed and delusional. So first step is to define the fear. Help articulate the exact suspicion, i.e. the boss is firing me tomorrow. The second step is to collect the evidence. 4. Ask, what concrete things make you certain that this is true, i.e. the boss looked at me strangely. And step 3, collect the evidence against. Ask what concrete facts support a different idea, i.e. I just received a raise, I've had a positive review scheduled, the boss looks stressed all the time. And step 4 is to draw a proportional conclusion. Help them conclude that the evidence against the fear outweighs the vague evidence for it. The reassurance is to use objective evidence as your final statement, based on clear facts, the raise and a positive review, the most likely outcome that we keep in their job, and we can check your email one more time and then we are done thinking about this for the day. And this reassurance is backed by data, not just denial. So that brings us to the close of episode 83 of No Nonsense Psychiatry on paranoia. I think the critical takeaway here is the distinction between healthy caution, which is flexible, evidence-based and protective, and clinical paranoia, which is rigid, pervasive and dysfunctional. Remember to assess suspicion based on the evidence, scope and function. If you are suffering from distressing, frequent or impairing suspicion thoughts, or if you're caring for someone whose paranoia has suddenly escalated, prioritize seeking some professional help. For moderate or situational paranoia, remember that to use 3 strategies. For yourself, practice the STOP, S-T-O-P-P, technique to interrupt that spiral thought. For others, use validation, no confrontation, and to acknowledge their distress by maintaining a safe reality. For everyone, to rely on the reality check protocol and to use objective evidence to draw proportionate conclusions. Thank you for tuning in to No Nonsense Psychiatry today. If this episode provided you with some clarity on a difficult topic, share it with somebody who could benefit from this distinction. Remember to like or follow if you can on Podbean. That would be really good. It'd be useful to know that there are regular people, and please comment whether you think the show is great, whether the show is rubbish, what I could do better, what I'm doing quite well. It's really, really helpful. We're up to episode 83 now, and I'm sure that the regular viewers must have some sort of impression now of how things are going. And I really, really would be interested to know. It would really help with making future shows. Until the next time then, remain vigilant, but remain grounded. Before we go, if you found the podcast helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit from it. You can also support the show by subscribing and leaving a review. It only takes a moment, but it makes a big difference in helping us reach more people. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode of No Nonsense Psychiatry.
No nonsense.